All right, today we are jumping into a really sharp strategic analysis of the conflict in Myanmar. It's all about urban warfare, but maybe not in the way you think. We're going to look at a playbook that argues victory isn't won with guns on the streets, but by controlling a city's lifelines.
So this really gets you thinking, right? How do you win a modern war when it's fought in a city? Well, the analysis we're digging into argues that it's less about head-to-head battles and a whole lot more about political maneuvering and, well, psychological games. Let's get into it.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off with the situation in Myanmar, then pull in some key lessons from history. After that, we'll pinpoint the regime's weak spots in the cities, which sets up a whole new strategic playbook. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the big takeaway.
All right, first section, urban warfare in Myanmar. You know, this really gets to the heart of the problem. If you're a resistance movement, how on earth do you take on a military regime right in its own backyard? We're talking about their centers of power, their government buildings, the whole shebang. It's a huge, huge challenge.
So to figure that out, this analysis looks back in time. It pulls from two really important historical case studies that teach us a lot about how city-based warfare can play out in very different ways.
First up, we've got the 1968 Tet Offensive in Vietnam. Now, this was a jaw-dropping moment, a massive, coordinated surprise attack on cities all across South Vietnam. It absolutely flipped the script on how everyone, especially people back in the US, saw that war.
Okay, look at this breakdown. This is where it gets fascinating. Militarily, the Tet Offensive was a total failure for the Viet Cong. They took massive casualties. But, and this is the key, politically, it was an absolute masterstroke. It completely destroyed the narrative back home that the war was being won. So the lesson here is huge. Sometimes an urban attack isn't about capturing ground. It's about shattering the enemy's story, their illusion of control, and breaking their will to fight.
All right, let's fast forward a few decades to a much more recent event, the fall of Kabul in 2021. I think we all remember watching that unfold, how incredibly fast the city just fell. But the thing is, the seeds of that collapse were planted way, way before those final days.
So the Taliban played a totally different game. Forget a big surprise attack. They played the long game, controlling the rural areas, slowly squeezing the life out of the central government. By the time they actually reached Kabul, the whole system was rotten from the inside out. It just collapsed. There wasn't some epic final battle. The big takeaway here? The victory was won before they even got to the capital, by setting up a total political collapse.
Okay, so with those two history lessons under our belt, Tet and Kabul, the analysis brings it all back to Myanmar today. It asks a simple question: what are the regime's weak spots? Where are the cracks in the armor? And it pinpoints three big ones for the State Administration Council, the SAC, right inside their own cities.
So the first vulnerability, it's not about military might. It's not tanks, it's not soldiers. It's the city's plumbing, its veins and arteries. Think about it. Big cities are incredibly fragile. They rely entirely on outside networks for everything. Power, water, internet, you name it.
And this is where the analysis gets really clever. It talks about levers of pain. The idea is, why fight their army head-on? Instead, you just squeeze. You find those pressure points that keep the city breathing. You cut the power grids. Boom, the city goes dark. You block the highways and suddenly there's no food coming in. You're basically paralyzing the regime's power base without ever firing a shot in a major battle.
Okay, weakness number two, the government machine itself. The analysis makes a really important point here. The civil disobedience movement has already done a ton of damage to the regime's ability to actually govern. Their civilian bureaucracy is a shell of its former self, so they're leaning super heavily on the military and police just to keep things running.
So the levers of pain here are all about breaking that machine. You target the symbols of control, the police stations, the courts, all those government buildings. You go after key people. The goal is to basically make the state headless. You create chaos and show everyone that the regime can't actually control anything.
And the third big weakness? It's all about morale. You gotta remember, the soldiers defending these cities often aren't the top-tier elite forces. They're guys who are exhausted, maybe they've just been pulled from the front lines, or worse, they're brand new conscripts who absolutely do not want to be there. Their will to fight is incredibly low.
So how do you exploit that? Well, you hit them with psychological warfare. You broadcast messages urging them to defect, you talk about their families, you remind them of the losses their units have taken, and then you pull a page from the Tet Offensive playbook.
You launch a surprise attack on a big, important headquarters. Even if you don't take it, the political shockwave is massive. It shatters their confidence.
So, you take the lesson from Vietnam, the power of psychological shock, and the lesson from Afghanistan, engineering a collapse from within. You mix that with a deep understanding of the regime's weak spots, and what you get is a completely new playbook. It is a total shift in how you think about this fight.
And this chart here just lays it out so clearly. On one side, you have direct confrontation. That's the high-risk, head-on fight against the regime's military. On the other side, you have this indirect strategy. You don't attack their strength, you attack their weakness. You go after logistics, administration, you basically engineer an internal collapse, just like in Kabul.
So this indirect strategy really has two main moves. The first one is called choking the cities. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It's taking those levers of pain and turning them into a full-blown campaign. We're not talking about a one-off power outage, we're talking about a relentless effort to cut off the power, the water, the food, the fuel, everything a city needs to survive, until the regime's base just grinds to a complete stop.
The second move happening at the same time is dismantling administration. So while you're choking the city's supplies, you're also making it impossible to govern. You hit the symbols of power, the people running the show, the goal is total chaos. You want to prove to everyone that the regime is powerless, that it can't protect anyone. And that creates a massive power vacuum.
Okay, let's wrap this all up. What is the big final takeaway here? Because it really changes the whole definition of victory in a conflict like this.
And here's the kicker, the one thing that makes this whole indirect strategy possible. The regime's biggest ace in the hole is its air power, right? But think about it. Using jets and bombs in a crowded city, it would be an absolute catastrophe for civilians. The international backlash would be huge. So they're hesitant to play their strongest card. And that hesitation, that's the strategic opening.
And that brings us to this one powerful quote that sums up the entire analysis. Victory isn't about a bloody battle to capture a city. No, it's about making it completely impossible for the regime to hold that city. Choking the cities and dismantling the administration are the keys to victory.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Is the future of this conflict, and maybe others just like it, going to be decided by big, dramatic battles or by blackouts? By the quiet, grinding breakdown of everyday life that makes a regime's grip on power simply impossible.